about. Do you deal with them all separately? Deal with them together. Dealing with them together is easier often to promote trust because individual stakeholders don't think other people are getting better treatment or preferential treatment to themselves, but it may be a difficult thing to be able to control. Need to very carefully balance issues of stakeholder value versus the negative reactions if some stakeholders feel they're not being given the same level of treatment, and whether you're prepared to cope with the feedback from that. Most importantly, there needs to be transparency in all interactions. Don't make promises you can't keep. Don't say you're going to do things that you have no intention to do. I mean, many of the stakeholders in the voter registration and electoral processes in general are canny political operators. They know when they're being told something that's sort of rubbish, and they're going to act as though it is. Honesty, transparency with stakeholders is paramount. International IDEA identifies 7 basic issues in the framework for dealing with stakeholders. And I'm going to draw on them. There's a framework. Firstly, maintaining open two-way communications. Secondly, being sensitive to stakeholder needs and concerns. Thirdly, seriously considering stakeholder views when making decisions. Next, treating stakeholders equitably so that none are unfairly advantaged or disadvantaged by decisions. Next, acting transparently with meetings, decisions open to scrutiny and follow-up. Next, maintaining the highest standards of ethics, respect for human rights, impartiality and care in relationships with stakeholders. Lastly, equitably resolving any conflicts between the needs of stakeholders, particularly voter registration authorities and their staff, and those of other stakeholders. Now, while these were originally developed in terms of how an electoral management body deals with stakeholders, they work equally well for interactions between any of the stakeholders in the voter registration. All mutual interactions. Now, in general, how could these be applied in practice? And this is just as a general overview. One's observation and presence. Being able to see, be present, hear what's happening at meetings that are determining frameworks for voter registration. This could be in terms of hearings on law, open public submissions on change in electoral reform to voter registration frameworks. Could be in terms of having transparency in electoral management body meetings. Secondly, formal liaison mechanisms. And again, yesterday we talked about some of the successful ways in which there can be formal mechanisms for multi-party liaison, so that particularly the parties in that sense are drawn into with the management of the process. Equally, it can apply to CSOs, it can equally apply to media, it can equally apply to the other stakeholders in voter registration. One thing that often is useful, not just the PR training nexus, but also the stakeholder training nexus, making sure that stakeholders have a full understanding of what it is happening with voter registration. If they don't understand, they're going to be critical. If they do understand, there's a chance they might not be critical. The worst criticism is the stuff that comes from a basis of total confusion or misunderstanding about the processes that are being applied. It wastes a lot of time. It's much, much more effective to get people and stakeholders in general to be able to attend training of registration officials so they know exactly what's meant to be happening. Proactive and responsive provision of information. So you provide regular, accurate information on voter registration, where it's at, what's being done, what the problems have been. Again, the transparency and the honesty. And that comes even down to inviting analysis. Ask people if they can see anything, ask stakeholders if they can see any problems with the process. And not just inviting analysis, but engaging with criticism. I mean, messengers of bad news often tend to get shot rather than listened to and shot rather than listened to and seriously considered. If the messengers feel that they're being considered, they're much more likely to be supportive. And lastly, if there are problems, don't try and sweep them under the carpet. Don't try and prevent people from making complaints about what's happening about the voter registration. And make sure that there is an effective complaint resolution mechanism to deal with any complaints that are made. Ignorance or ignoring the complaint will just help it to build up. And publicly build up through the media and through activists pushing an issue that has not been effectively resolved. Now, okay, this stakeholder involvement is really great and really wonderful, but a lot of these stakeholders have got political power, and particularly if an organisation managing voter registration gets too close to a particular stakeholder, there can be allegations of political influence or influence from a particular sector of society. So while the input and the engagement and the interactivity is really important, there shouldn't be any appearance of stakeholder control, particularly any particular stakeholder controlling the decisions of those that are managing voter registration. And that's particularly from politically connected stakeholders. And I don't pretend to have any solution for this, is how do you deal with the problem stakeholders? And this is probably, it is one of the most important issues. What do you do with people who just don't want to coordinate with you, who are always going to be critical, no matter how good a job? Now, there are a number of strategies. You could make greater efforts to include them in the process and use the other stakeholders as in an attempt to rein in the rogues and use the opprobrium of the others who are being consulted in a group to try and influence those who are causing problems to tone down what they are doing. You may feel that it's better to exclude them, that it's too much trouble to try and deal with all of the complaints, that they can be marginalised by exclusion. You need to look at the stakeholder value. How much influence can these rogues have on the process? And it's really important here that these people are really rogues, not people who are reasonably and responsibly criticising what's happening. But whatever happens, there has to be a strategy. It just can't be left to fester. Now, that's one